and where you find that empathy, look at this.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
All right, welcome back and thanks for staying with us on Daybreak right here on Trust TV. Right now, we'll take a look at the front pages of the newspapers to see what's going on this morning, and we'll start with the Daily Trust newspaper. And the major story on the front page is quite a sad one. 38 herders killed in Nasarawa air raid. And we have riders here that says, our innocent members were killed by Air Force, says Makban. And drone used for shelling of pastoralists, says Governor Sule. It is worst evil of profiling, according to the Northern Elders, and assures investigation, and the military keeps mum. Details of that story can be found on page 3. Going towards the bottom of the front page is there, and we go political. Tinubu, failed crisis, Naira redesign ploy to sabotage elections. And he has the riders here, the story, so we won't accept postponement, probe Asiwaju, that's according to the PDP, and presidency, CBN, APC, quite mum about the situation. Details of that can be found on page 4. Going towards the top of the front page now, talking about security. Bandits reject 5.3 million naira old naira notes in Kaduna, say deadline approaching. Find details of that on page 20. Used vehicles import crashes 40% with customs valuation scheme. And 20th Daily Trust Dialogue holds today in Abuja. Details of that can be found on page 5. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper.
Moving on to This Nigeria, we have there as the major story, Senate jettison Buhari's 22.7 trillion ways and means requests. Says CBN Governor Emefiele, Finance Minister Ahmed failed to give details of requests, suspend plenary for elections. Moving on, Tinubu alleges plan to use Naira redesign fuel scarcity to sabotage polls. Nigeria gets $538 million from AFDB orders for agro-industrial processing zones. And you have pictures there from the council chamber where we had the Federal Executive Council meeting at the Presidential Villa yesterday. PDP to conduct fresh Guber primaries in Abia to pick Ikone's replacement, Ikpeazu Ohaneze Obi Mons Passage. And right beside the nameplate there, we have Senate confirms ex-IGP Arasi as chairman of the Police Service Commission. These are the major stories on the front page of This Nigeria.
Next, we'll take a look at the Punch newspaper. The major story on the front page reads, recent crisis aimed at stopping me, says Tinubu. Details of that on page 2. And the writer says Naira redesign, fuel scarcity designed to scuttle poll. Tinubu trying to blackmail Buhari, according to Atiku campaign. And allegations unfair, fuel crisis perennial, says marketers. And going towards the bottom of the front page there, suspense as tribunal decides Adeleke Oyetola suit Friday. That is on page 7. Ikpeazu Ohaneze mourn Abia PDP governorship candidate. That is on page 8. And parties back U.S. visa ban on election riggers. Details of that story can be found on page 13. At very close to the masthead there, duty hike, used vehicle imports fall by 40%. And at the very top of the front page, FG budgets 1.2 trillion naira to service CBN loans. Details on page 20. And banks ration new notes, Emefiele shuns reps, and that is on page 10. Voting Atiku will be a mistake, says whistleblower. Details of that can be found on page 14. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper.
And moving on to the Nation newspaper, still staying with Tinubu's comment in Abeokuta yesterday. Tinubu, fifth columnist behind petrol scarcity, Naira redesign rule, says there are plans to embarrass Buhari and scuttle elections. It does appear that the Nation seem to have some source different from what we all seem to have gotten with the other papers yesterday. Those plotting to deal with me won't win elections, says Wiki. And to other stories, impeachment, Ekiti court orders party to fight processes. And UK slam visa ban on enemies of democracy. Bomb blast kill 51 in Nasarawa, victims get mass burial. And finally, we have how Africa can banish food insecurity by Buhari. These are the major stories on the front page of the Nation newspaper.
The next paper we're looking at is the Nigerian News Direct, and the head major story is in keeping with what we have seen so far. Opposition hoarding fuel to sabotage 2023 presidential election, says Tinubu, and vows to reduce fuel price, says no to strike in tertiary institutions. Details of that story can be found on page 2. FG goes tough against aviation workers, says union strike now prohibited. And Nigeria's debt, 22.7 trillion naira, CBN's Ways and Means loan to FG suffers at Senate. And towards the top of the front page there, 2023, BVAS will retire fraudulent politicians, that is according to INEC. And CBN disburses 114.17 billion naira under 100 for 100 policy. And talking about security now, Imo, gunmen attack checkpoint, kill 2 policemen, VIO personnel. Now those are the major stories on the front page of Nigerian News Direct.
Moving on to First News newspaper, leading there with a different focus. 2023, U.S. sends warning signal to election riggers. Others. You'll find there the picture of the president from a file, I suppose, with the president of the United States. Slams visa ban on persons who undermine Osun Ekiti Guba polls. Says February election on the radar. Reiterate threats to declare ineligible for U.S. visa anyone found wanting in the 2023 general election. Very interesting developments there from the United States, and hopefully we will see other major destinations joining in this suit. If you make this place unlivable and ungovernable, you should remain here to reap the fruit of your labor, isn't it? To other stories, bomb explosion kills 27 herdsmen in Nasarawa. Presidency lambasts Yakase affirms Buhari's support for Tinubu. Fuel scarcity, Naira redesign plots to sabotage election, Tinubu cries out, says as PDP accuses APC flag bearer of trying to blackmail Buhari. To other stories, woman marries daughter's boyfriend in Kano. My father has capacity to lead Nigeria, Tinubu's son. And policewoman assaults Professor Zainab Abiola. Policewoman's assault, Professor Zainab Abiola has case to answer. And to the last story there, as governor, I have not seen new Naira notes, says Oton. These are the major stories on the front page of First News newspaper.
All right, next we'll take a look at the Blueprint newspaper, and still keeping with what we have seen so far. Fuel scarcity, Naira redesign, plot to sabotage February polls, and that is according to Tinubu, declares this election a revolution. We are going to win. PCC raises concern over attacks on loyalists in Osun, asks Buhari, IGP, others to wade in. We won't campaign for presidential election, says Wike, and leave Naira redesign for next government, Dixon tells federal government. Details of that story can be found on page 6 and 7. Buhari to commission Ahmedi Lafia, February 4th. That's according to Naseni. Details of that on page 5. 27 herders killed by gunmen in Nasarawa community. That is also on page 5 of the Blueprint newspaper. Still talking security, Edo police recover 11 pump-action rifles, arrest 135 suspects. And talking about the economy now, support rice farmers to boost production. LCCI urges banks, others. Reps summon NMPCL, others over lingering fuel scarcity. And CVFF, Nemasa meets with approved primary lending banks. Still talking about the Blueprint newspaper, how Africa can feed itself, produce surplus for export, according to Buhari. And Ways and Means, Nigeria risks additional 1.8 trillion naira debt. Senate jettisons passage of 22.7 trillion naira, adjourns till February 28th. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper.
And moving on to Business Day and staying with business activities in the country. Commuters groan over as ATM runs out of cash. That's to staying with the Naira design and the approaching deadline. Crude oil shortage deters Nigeria's modular refineries expansion. You'll find the details of that on page 2. And customers' frustration grow on no dollar VER money transfer. And first casting naira redesign plot to discredit me, and that is coming from Tinubu. You'll find there on the front page pictures of the overhead bridge commissioning in Yola yesterday by the governor, Governor Fintri, among other PDP dignitaries, the governors of Cross River, of Delta, the presidential candidate of the party, among other dignitaries at the event yesterday. These are the major stories on the front page of Business Day. And that is where we wrap it up on the front page. And we now have joining us in the studio to provide more details to the stories that made the front page, the editor-in-chief, Dateline newspaper, Marlon Nasrullah. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome back. It is indeed. We are starting on a very sad note. Well, some papers said 52, others said 27, but the Daily Trust is reporting 38 headers killed in Nasarawa air raid yesterday. We saw pictures emerging from the mass burial. It is becoming these killings are now happening with reckless abandon. I think it was in December that we saw the unfortunate case of what happened in Zamfara State. And no serious explanation was offered other than the fact that they would investigate it. I mean, this thing happened in broad daylight. Everybody has the information. I wonder what the investigation was to produce. And then barely several weeks after, we now have this in nearby Nasarawa State. What's your impression when this story got to you?
Well, it's quite unfortunate that more than 24 hours, that's getting to 48 hours after the incident, because we're talking about, I think, Tuesday night.
Yes.
We are still not even sure of the number of casualties, let alone who is responsible. And if you see from the media reports, some are saying 27. I think the ones reporting 27 are quoting the Commissioner of Police in Nasarawa State. Some are saying 38, some are saying 41, some are even saying 51. As far as I'm concerned, even if it is maybe only 2 people, this shouldn't happen. And the fact that there was no explanation also is another problem that I find, very hard to stomach, because even the military with the best, access to intelligence, modern equipment and what have you, things like this happen, but when they happen, the way they will be explained and the way they will apologize, even those that are affected, will find a way to understand that, okay, this thing was not done deliberately. But you can see, we just finished talking about the fact that something like this happened in towards the end of there. And then still there was no explanation. Luckily for us, even the Air Force was out there apologizing, that it was actually a mistake. But in this case, some are saying it's explosion, that's from a drone. Some are saying, no, it's airstrike and whatever. So it's also unfortunate that we are still talking, this way. And as far as those who have lost their loved ones are concerned, even if their loved ones are the only ones affected, that's the ones that they know. So sometimes we look at the numbers as if they explain anything. I don't think they do, because unless we start putting names to these numbers, people may see them just as mere numbers. So I will expect this to be handled, with efficiently. It shouldn't be treated the way, the ones that happened in the past were treated. We should know who is responsible. We should know what actually went wrong, and then compensation. All the things that need to be done. We should be able to do that.
We know that this concerns the ministry, the military, and every time these things happen, some concerned Nigeria attempted to say you cannot carry out what appears to be like a heinous crime and be the one investigating yourself. That at some point, perhaps the National Human Rights Commission should be involved in whatever they call that investigation. And maybe if a neutral person is telling Nigerians that this is the circumstance, then it will be even, we could then crave the kind of sympathy that we want. At what point would you begin to see those kind of 38? I mean, if this was an what do you call it now, an air crash, the entire globe would have been in mourning this morning. We lose people, and it just feels okay to just move on, as if breadwinners of some families have not completed, and we don't hear any useful. So, what would you advise, for instance, going forward, that how do we handle these things, and at what point does the presidency even get involved? In other climes, things happen that claim, I mean, school shootings happen, claims 5 to 10 lives. The president is addressing the nation. But here you don't even get the highest authority on a live TV program explaining the circumstances and detailing what will be done, and even compensations where necessary. How do you think we should handle this kind of fatality going forward?
Well, I think agencies like the Human Rights Commission you mentioned should be able to investigate this without any prompting, you know, and the presidency and all the relevant authorities shouldn't wait, you know, for the media to start, you know, asking for explanations. These are things that they, you know, need to explain to Nigerians, to tell us how, you know, it happened and what they will be doing, you know, to avert something like this happening in the future. Because I also find it like contradictory for you to be a judge in your own case. If you are being accused, you know, of doing anything, then you should allow a neutral party, you know, to be the one that will investigate, so that we'll be able to get to the bottom of it without any outside influence, because that's what you end up having if you allow those that are being accused of perpetrating the act to also be the ones that will investigate it. And honestly, it's also quite unfortunate that we don't place, you know, much importance to human lives in Nigeria. We are talking about 38 people, and then still no credible, no timely, you know, response, announcement detailing anything from either the presidency. And it's good that the governor of Nasarawa, you know, came out to explain. At least, you know, we will know that at some level, you know, the government was actually involved. He actually also said that he reached out to his colleague in Benue, and all the things that they concerned that happened, even though the governor was saying people have already, you know, started accusing him of being behind it, that some were even destroying his billboards and posters in Benue, because maybe some are seeing the political side of it. They have already started, you know, turning things into politics. And sadly, the moment you start doing that, then all the details may get lost, you know, in the process.
All right, well, talking about politicizing issues, one story that seems to be making the rounds across virtually all newspapers is the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress. And he says that the fuel crisis, the Naira redesign, are a ploy to sabotage elections. I think some other headlines even put it more directly, saying that they are targeted towards him and stopping him from winning the elections. Some will ask the question, this is an APC government. These policies are seen to be brainchildren of an APC government, and this is an APC presidential candidate saying that these things are targeted towards stopping him from becoming president. What's the correlation between that? I mean, like, does it mean that there's infighting within the APC, or he doesn't trust his own party?
Well, you know, like the first story we spoke about, it actually depends on who you are speaking to. You can see what the Nation reported is quite different from what the Daily Trust is reporting. Same thing with what the Punch, you know, actually said. And if you are talking about holding, then already you can see the market has trying to say, no, we are not part of it. So some may say probably he was referring to the marketers and what have you. But for the marketers to be able to do all this sabotage, it also means there is negligence on the part of those, that are supposed to play the regulatory aspect of it. And then when you also talk about the Naira redesign, so many people are accusing the banks rather than the government, of maybe preparing their loyal customers, their big customers, giving them preference over the common man. And so with that also, some may say he is referring to the banks rather than the government. But again, like I said, the CBN is also supposed to play a supervisory role to make sure that things like this happen. So no matter how you look at it, this is something that so many people will find a way of linking it to the government of the day. And even though he spoke in Yoruba, and I can see even the Yorubas are saying that you need to, be very good at it to be able to understand exactly what he was trying to say. And it also happened in Ogun State, where he made the famous, is it Emilokan statement, So maybe it's about Ogun State, that he finds the audience, maybe at home, and where he can voice out all his grievances and what have you. But you can see even the PDP, what they are trying to do. They have cashed in on it. And they are already saying that the man is trying to blackmail the president. And I don't think there is room for that anymore, because you are now the candidate. That's right. And you should be able to run on your own steam. Whether the president will want to support you or not, you know what you voted for in the first place. So you should also be ready to face all the arrows coming from, wherever. So.
Interesting developments there from Abeokuta. In fact, some of the opposition parties were saying perhaps you should avoid Abeokuta because it has become a place for for dropping bombs. But still staying with the Naira, Daily Trust is reporting that bandits are now rejecting the old Naira notes. They rejected some 53 million old Naira notes in Kaduna, saying the deadline is approaching. Interesting how people we perceive to be illiterate in our minds, not so sophisticated, now adhering to policies in the circular. That means really that if we tighten our nose, perhaps we can also reach these people by controlling how some of our policies operate. Well, on the one hand, they are still holding on to those they kidnapped, but the central bank governor in his briefing 2 days ago said that kidnapping had gone down, that they've sort of slowed down what they are doing, hoping that whenever we are done with this whole redesign, maybe they could pick up again. But it shows clearly that if we get it right and limit cash operation, we can as well control a lot of vices, or at least create some digital footprints that can enable us trace this transaction. But how do you see these comments on the front page of Daily Trust?
Well, what the bandits are trying to tell you is the fact that when the policy was being introduced, they were said to be, some of the targets that maybe when you do this, you will frustrate their ability to raise money and what have you. But the fact that things like this continue to happen, it shows you then that there is something missing along the way, because what happens to all the money in circulation, the ones that the CBN is claiming to have given the banks and what have you? Because I also believe, those who are accusing the system, of giving some preference to some big men, because I also believe there are so many people that will still go back to, keeping this huge amount of cash at home, because what they don't like is for them to be able to, for the government or the relevant authorities to be able to trace, to track their transactions. And if that is the case, then also the bandits have also shown that they are also keen into that, because by the time maybe you get the new ones, and then you deliver it to us. We allow your loved ones to go back to you. But as it is, honestly, it doesn't appear as if the policy is doing anything to. And I also don't believe that kidnapping and what have you is going down. Not from what we are reading in the newspapers and other forms of.
All right, so let me just get your opinion on this, the whole Naira redesign policy thing and the whole deadline shifting and non-shifting thing. I mean, from your own perspective, from what we have seen so far with the unavailability of the new notes and people saying that they are not able to have access to them. I think we heard the story of a governor saying that as a governor he hasn't seen the new Naira notes. I don't know how true that actually is, but still, with this, do you think a postponement is in order? Are people right to be calling for a postponement of the deadline?
Yeah, certainly. Remember the governor of Yobe State, saying that in his state, only 4 local governments, out of 17, had the presence of banks, But if you also listen to what the people are saying, you go to the bank thinking that you will have the new currency notes, only for you to be still withdrawing the old notes from the ATM machines. If that is the case, then honestly, I will also support those calling for extension. Because you cannot ask me to continue, receiving this money and then in the end tell me that I may not be able to spend it once it is January 31st. So if that should be the case, anytime I deliver the old notes, I should be able to get the new ones, whether it's from the counter, whether it's from the ATM machines or wherever. But for you to take the old notes to the banks and then still receive old notes in return, then what are we saying? Honestly, I also believe that 90 days could have been enough. But the fact that we didn't do enough publicity. Enough publicity, and what we were supposed to do, we are now ending up with situations like this. Very unfortunate.
Indeed. To another side incident that occurred yesterday from Abia State, where the PDP candidate passed on, and now they have a date to conduct fresh primaries in the PDP. We're also hearing that another front runner in the state, and one of the major frontrunners is also battling ill health. He slumped in one of the campaign grounds and had not been seen in the public domain since December. But what does this speak to as far as our political processes are concerned? Because even our processes emphasize the need for people to be healthy, to be strong. It's not a race for the weak. Clearly, the way our political structures are fashioned out, without speaking ill of the dead. What would be your comments to people who are, thinking of pursuing political aspirations? Because some of them are coming to office, we had seen, with this kind of ailment, and then the office just become a rehabilitation ground. We saw with the former governor of Enugu State, who was always traveling and was not seen in public domain almost throughout. We saw the case of Taraba, until he passed on. What would be your comment in situations like this? Because it wasn't from some quarters and what we hear, it wasn't unexpected. He wasn't very strong even before he picked up the ticket.
Well, there is something about life, that is beyond interpretation, so to say. The fact that you are healthy, that does not mean you cannot die the next minute.
That's right.
When the former governor of Kaduna State, for instance, Patrick Yakowa died, he died in a plane crash. And our leaders keep flying left, right, and center. So anything can happen. Even if you are sitting at home, once it is time for you to go,
you go.
But it will also be good for people to use what they know, to take decisions. If you know that you are not, in the best of health, why should you put yourself in a situation whereby even if you are there, some other people will be the ones that will be running the show, when in actual sense it is your own name that goes around. So like they said, in the case of Abia, the man has not been seen for quite a while, that they were even unsure of what will happen, that by the time the presidential candidate of the party will go there, he may not be able to present himself to even receive the flag and things like that. But it also means probably there were so many people that, were behind his candidature.
That's right.
He didn't have like an opportunity for him to speak. Probably he will have told us, probably he has even voiced that to the people around him that, look, I want to end all this. But because those who want him there, are like also seeing things differently, believing that maybe magic or miracle will happen and he will return to the best of health, they held on. But like I said, there is no, like the former Minister of Health once said, there is no science on earth that can say with 100% certainty that because you are sick, you are going to die the next minute, or because you are healthy, then nothing can happen. Whatever. But as human beings, anytime we speak about death, we look at those that are having one or two challenges, maybe of old age, sickness, and what have you. But people should be able to exert their own position in issues like this, so that people will not like continue to use you like in a game of chess, just moving you from one position to the other when you are not like...
it's appearing like an African thing. I mean, you saw the video of the Cameroonian president at the African event with the United States president. He wasn't even sure of where he was. He was asking them practically, who are these people? Are they important people? They said, no, this is what you need to say. Just read this page. Are you supposed to? I mean, it gets to that vegetative stage, like you said, where they basically just ship him into the presidential flight, fly him into a country to address an audience that he's not sure of what he's talking about, or even sure of where he was at the time. A very, very pitiful circumstance in our continent, unfortunately.
So the issue is the incident in South Sudan as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, practically peeing on himself in a public...
and not having no idea.
Yes, that he was doing that.
So I think,
and then you see like the people around him coming out to explain that no, he is the one behind all the decisions, he is the one doing, when in reality it doesn't look...
He's not even in charge of himself.
In charge of himself.
Being in charge of a country. Well, that's quite disheartening. Well, so we're talking about being in charge. This ways and means thing seems to have been dragging on for so long. We had this issue, the president sent a request to the National Assembly, went back and forth, it came back again, and now we're hearing that they have jettisoned the request by the president, and that we might incur another 1.8 trillion debt consequently because of that. How significant is this this abandonment of this issue by the Senate?
Well, it's like even the president is no longer interested in it, because if he's still interested, all the officials that the Senate, they would have made themselves available to the Senate and then explain things. Because the Senate is actually saying, no, we cannot consider this, because even the officials that are supposed to appear before us and explain things are not doing that. So why should we continue? So probably even the president has, changed his mind over the whole thing.
Interesting. Finally, you were here with us. You had seen several Daily Trust dialogue. We were having the 20th in the series of this dialogue, and the forthcoming election is a major focus on our conversation, especially the conduct of candidates and the prospects that this election offers. What are your thoughts, as we prepare to go into that conversation later this morning?
Well, I expect that there will be robust discussions, because even from the personalities lined up to participate in it. And honestly, to be able to do this for 20 years, it calls for celebration, congratulations, or things like that. But, just saying things, holding all these events, is one thing. And then being able to implement all the good things that are likely to come out of it is another. So I see the Daily Trust as playing its own role, which is to serve
Engender
as
conversation.
yes, a platform for all sorts different ideas, and then that's much they can do. As for implementation, and then using all the things that are likely to come out of the conference or the dialogue, then that is actually beyond them. It's for the authorities and other people's concern to be able to do it. So I congratulate the company for being able to sustain this for 2 decades.
All right, that's a lovely note to end the newspaper review on. Nasrullah, thank you very much for coming in, and we do appreciate your insights, your perspectives, and we look forward to seeing you at the dialogue.
Thank you for having me.
Have a nice day.
All right, so we'll take a short pause right now, and when we return, it will be top of the hour, and Daybreak continues. To stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that